Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good! Oh, yeah?
Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Happy Thanksgiving weekend, and thanks for spending a portion of it with us here at the Logger Line, your source for commentary on all things Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Ben Dubose, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire and contributor to Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of the Rockets, joined by my good friend, co-host, and producer out of Portugal, Paulo Alves. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben Dubose, Paulo on Twitter /X at Paulo Alves NBA. You can also follow our friends at Carbach Brewing, simply at Carbach Brewing. They support this show with help from Sports Talk 790. And of course, the name of the show, The Logger Line, is because the show is served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager, their beer developed in collaboration with the Houston Rockets. So as we're recording this Friday, November 24th, the Rockets have actually lost 3 or 4 games since we last recorded in, I want to say, early last week during that hiatus between the 6-game winning streak, which concluded with the Nuggets home game. Now they're about to play the Nuggets again on Friday night. And then the 3-game road trip against the Clippers, Lakers, and Warriors. Rockets lost all 3 of those games, although they were very close, and then came home Wednesday night against the Grizzlies, Thanksgiving Eve, and just absolutely obliterated Memphis in the second half. It was close really through the first 2.5 quarters. And then late in the third, early in the fourth quarters, the Rockets pulled away, led by as many as 24 points. And it was all courtesy of an explosion from Jalen Green, 26 of his game-high 34 points in the second half, including a poster dunk over Jaren Jackson Jr. For my money, it's honestly one of the best dunks I've ever been in an arena for, when you consider not just the dunk itself, but who he did it against. An annual Defensive Player of the Year frontrunner. That was a big boy play, and it's sort of symbolic because it came on the heels of one of the worst 3-game stretches we've seen from Jalen in a while. On that road trip, he shot about 35% from the field, below 25% from 3, and it just continues what we've seen from Jalen over his now 2+ seasons in the NBA, which is a lot of very high highs and also, unfortunately, a lot of lows, and it can be a bit confounding. There's a roller coaster element to it, and now hopefully the Rockets are on something of an upswing. But big picture, the Rockets want to minimize those lows and get it to where you're not having so many extreme peaks and valleys. That's one of the big tasks for Ime Udoka this season. But before we get into Jalen in particular, I think where I wanted to start our discussion today, even though the Rockets are 1-3 since we last recorded, I actually think I'm more optimistic about them with regards to the season as a whole, because those 3 losses on the road trip, look, the Clippers and Lakers games were tied in the final 10 seconds. Those were coin flip games, and there was some awful officiating as well. The Golden State game, they lost by 5 on a night where the Warriors basically shot 50% plus from 3 on high volume. Clay and Steph both went off, I think, like 10 of 20 combined from behind the arc. So if you're within 5 in San Francisco, night 2 of a back-to-back, 3rd game in 4 nights, with the Warriors playing that well, you're obviously doing something right. And Alperen Sengun, 30 points and 13 rebounds, obviously the headliner as he's been for much of this season. Jalen Green, perhaps the low light, because obviously he was benched the 3rd quarter after being relatively inefficient and struggling with his playmaking defensively. Aaron Holiday played the entire 4th quarter in his place, mostly alongside the other 4 starters of Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alperen Sengun. Then, of course, Rockets got home Wednesday and picked it up against a Memphis team that isn't as good as the teams they played on the road trip, and the result reflected it. They won with ease by 20 points. And so, for me, when you take a step back, the road trip was frustrating, but the level of play was very good for the season as a whole. The Rockets entered Thanksgiving ranked 4th in the NBA on the defensive end. The offense is hit or miss in large part because the Rockets tend to go as Jalen Green goes, and he's very streaky, as we were just outlining. But in terms of the team overall, defense travels. If your defense is this good, and we have a large sample, 13 games is not irrelevant at all. I'm getting to a point now where even though, again, they're not perfect, the offense is going to have some games where, especially against good opponents, they run into trouble. But we're at a point now, 7-3 over their last 10 games, and the 3 losses all extremely competitive. It's never fun to lose, but I do think that these last 4 games hit home that this is not the 7-game win streak from December 2021 when Gary Bird went off. This is not flukish. This is consistently good basketball, particularly on the defensive end of the court. They are tough. They are hard-nosed. There's no guarantees that it continues because, especially in the NBA, all it takes is one injury. And if Fred VanVleet rolls an ankle, he's one guy that's just completely irreplaceable. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, the Rockets are for sure going to win 35 plus games or be in play-in contention, because, again, it's all subject to change based on injuries. But generally speaking, even though they've lost 3 of 4, and who knows, maybe it's 4 or 5, because Denver on Friday night is going to be very tough, especially when you consider the Nuggets lost to the Rockets in that same building at Toyota Center 12
and they
days
just lost to
earlier.
the Magic. They just lost to the Magic, so they're gonna take that one serious.
Yeah, just like, the Clippers were on the 6-game losing streak, same with the Warriors. So it's sort of the perfect setup for those teams to not overlook the Rockets. And the Nuggets are going to want some revenge on the Rockets the same way the Lakers did after losing by 34 points at Toyota Center. Although you can, of course, point out that, hey, the Rockets are 7-1 at home this year. They're 0-5 on the road. I think a lot of that is circumstantial. The scheduling factors hurt them on the road trip, but they are still relatively young and inexperienced. So I'm sure some of the home factors help. And especially with Jalen Green, he's always had some home-friendly splits over his career. But look, the bottom line for me at this point, I actually feel better about the Rockets now, and I think I will, regardless of what happens against the Nuggets. I guess if they lose by 40 points, that would be really bad. But the bottom line is they are consistently competing. They're not taking nights off. Even when they lose, they look the part of a competitive, hard-nosed NBA team. That defense travels no matter the opponent. So not a perfect week. The issues with Jalen are real, and we'll get into that. But I think in the macro, I'm feeling more confident that, assuming relatively good health, this is going to be a season for the Rockets where they're playing competitive, relevant basketball well into 2024. How about you?
Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, as if you guys follow me on Twitter, you'll know that I didn't watch the full games on any of the losses, so you can blame me. I mean, we haven't lost a game that I've watched, so besides the first 3.
The West Coast games are brutal for people in Europe, I will point out.
It's insane. Like the games started at 3 a.m., 2:30, and 3:30 a.m. It's like I work the next day. It's literally impossible. That being said, when you look at the losses in specific, like the Clippers game was a toss-up, right? We got screwed by the refs. The Lakers game the same. It was still a toss-up. The Warriors one, it's just the same old Warriors. Klay Thompson can stink it up for the entire season. Whenever he steps in to play the Rockets, he's always going to go off. Steph Curry, the exact same thing. I mean, the Warriors, I can double check right now. I think they shot like over 50. They shot 48% from 3. They made 21 threes. And this isn't the old Rockets.
40 volume. Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't the old Rockets or the last 3 years of Rockets where they don't play defense, so it's normal for teams to get hot from time to time. Like, we didn't play our best defense against the Warriors, obviously. It was one of our worst defensive games of the season in general. But still, 21 threes is absolutely insane. That was the NBA record. I think the Rockets broke the record with 23s at some point in the last, during the James Harden era. So that game is it's the same as the first Warriors game, right? We kept it competitive until the end, and then Steph Curry and Klay Thompson happened, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then the Grizzlies, the first half against the Grizzlies, for me, is actually one of our worst halves of the season. It was a little bit of playing down to the competition. It was a little bit of we only gave up 46 points at the half, but it still felt like we weren't playing the best defense that we are able to play. And part of it was that, it's hard to prepare for a team that has no stars, basically. I mean, they have Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr., but not exactly your typical shot-creating stars. So, yeah, I was actually pretty underwhelmed, pretty mad going into halftime. But then, I guess we'll transition into Jalen a little bit later, but because I want to talk a little bit about the defense first. Sure. Like, we are a different type of defensive team. Like, we don't get a lot of blocks and a lot of steals. We are just fundamentally sound. Like, we're not relying on athleticism to make flashy plays. We don't have an insane rim protecting center or a Chet Holmgren at the 4 or a Giannis or someone like that, right? We play great defense based on everybody being committed. And
it's the connectivity.
Yeah, and that fluctuates. Like if we had the highlight players, we'd fluctuate on their form. This way, we fluctuate on team morale, and it's up to Udoka to make sure team morale remains high, and we don't go on a massive losing streak or we don't lose by 50 points, because that's the way our defense works. I think we are 27th? Yeah, I got it right here. 27th in blocks per game, 25th in steals per game, and have a top 5 defense, if I'm not mistaken. So it further proves my point. So I want to touch on that about the defense, and then about the offense. We're such a good defensive team that there's games where we stay in the game just because of the defense, but then we can't keep up. Like we couldn't keep up against the Warriors because for them it was really easy to get a 3, and for us, like it was the definition of the 3 is like 1.5 twos, right? We kept exchanging 3s for 2s, and it felt like we just couldn't keep up offensively. Even though we were playing great defense, every 3 felt like a bomb because we were struggling so much on the other end.
Right.
Until we got harder as the game went on, especially in the fourth quarter. This to say that this proves even more, like a lot of people talk about how the scoring shooting guard in the NBA is kind of something that's going out of style that doesn't contribute to winning, right? This is the situation, and transitioning into Jalen Green, because I know we want to talk about him. This is the situation where the scoring shooting guard archetype is so valuable, because your defense is so good that at times you just need individual brilliance offensively to carry you across the finish line, and that's exactly what happened against the Grizzlies, right? The game was extremely close. Jalen was stinking it up like he has done for a few games now. Operation Shengun was not his best self. Like it was easily his worst game of the season, and I mean, guy deserves a day off after carrying us for so long.
We should note, by the way, Jabari Smith has been a little better of late, and he did have some big buckets in the first half that sort of helped the Rockets stay in contact with the Grizzlies. They've gone to the mid-range game a bit more of late, but even so, it's not like Jabari is an explosive scorer. So while you give him credit, certainly, and he's helped them, he's also taken steps defensively. At the same time, it's not like Jabari is going to put you over the finish line offensively. That's where, particularly with this team construct, you need Jalen Green to be that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jabari, not only is Jabari just not consistent enough, the one thing he is sort of consistent at is not long twos, but mid-range shots, right? The least efficient shot in the game. He can make it passable, right? Because he's become really good at it. But once again, if you're exchanging twos for 3s, you're not really keeping up. And if this was a better offensive team, we probably would have gotten blown out in the first half. But yeah, credit to Jabari, he's up to 37% from 3, 49% from the field, 70% from the free throw line. He's like actually efficient now, even though it's a small role and he's right now playing like a role player. That's what we thought the floor was. But going back to Jalen, that's where his archetype becomes so valuable, because it's instant offense, right? And if he is rolling, he is, besides Şengün, the only other guy on our team that is supposed to reliably be able to create offense by himself. Like he has an easy way to create an advantage because of his speed, right? And it's just about capitalizing on that advantage. And we have that, and we have Alperen Şengün in the post. Right? Yeah. That's basically what we have when we need a bucket, right? And we saw the game was close until Jalen really turned it on, and then the game was not close anymore, and our defense made it so it was a complete blowout. It's also not the case where with other iterations of the Rockets where they blow up offensively, but at the same time they can't keep the other team from scoring, and so it's a shootout until the end of the game. No, it's really hard for this team to get into a shootout. I mean, our season high in points, I think it's 128 against the Lakers. But if we ignore the Spurs game that went to overtime and the Hornets game, which is the only true shootout that we have like an average of like 100 points per game given up, which is pretty insane for the turnaround that this team has had. This to say that moving forward, right, this is the vision on a team for Ime Udoka without Sengun and Jalen Green, right? Just like in Boston, you had Marcus Smart, not a great offensive player. You had Robert Williams, not a great offensive player. Al Horford, not exactly a shot creator. You had, I think it was Derek White at the time, if not Brogdon, but still, neither of them really explosive offensive players. Just a bunch of defensive guys. But then you had the two stars, Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum, who were in charge of putting the game away offensively. And I think the vision for now, until some other guy can fill those shoes, heavily relies on Jalen Green and Alper Sengun to do so. And Sengun has knocked it out of the park so far. And not only does Sengun make himself better, he makes every single role player around him better as well. Jalen not so much like that, but we finally started seeing what the vision is. Like the defense is going to keep the games close, and it's Jalen Green's job to pull away with his scoring. And to talk specifics about what happened in the game, I think the biggest takeaway that you can take from it is Jalen Green, and you can see this all over Twitter, and I've talked about this even in the Silas era. Jalen Green doesn't need a screen. Jalen Green needs space, and in most matchups, he's going to be able to blow by his guy just off the dribble. Like it's not much different from what you see Ja Morant do, which is, hey, sometimes all he needs to do is back out all the way back to the logo and get a running start, and he'll get
nobody's going to be able to keep him in front of him.
Yeah, like there's very few guys in the league that are, and if we start with that, then you can move on to, if help comes, you kick it out, because the Rockets are one of the worst teams at kicking it out to the corners. But let's get downhill first, and the Rockets really struggle to get Jalen Green to get downhill, and when he does, when he finally gets to the rim, it's not just beating his man, it's beating the help, and a lot of the times there's more than one guy helping as well. So I think most of his buckets were from ISO, which is, I mean, it's exactly what you get when you don't get a screen. And you don't want to develop into an ISO ball team, but when you're this not great on offense, you gotta take what you can get, and you can still run the same sets, and Jordan Green can still be used off ball, but you've got to encourage him to, hey, I've got a mismatch, I'm going to punish it. Let's give him the ball, or give me the ball, and I'm going to do it, because he's also a confidence guy. And that's what we saw this game. That's what we saw against the Lakers when he started off well, and then was just hitting three after three.
And if you've read the quotes from both Jalen Green and Ime Udoka, the phrase you hear more than anything is be aggressive. They want to build his confidence. They want him to take the reins. And I do think that, I believe it was Nathan Fogg that pointed this out, but over his entire career, Jalen Green's that is, he's been consistently a better player at home than on the road. For this season,
I
he's
got
averaging,
stats for that if you want.
Yeah, I've got him up right now. Nearly 22 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists at home, shooting better than 43% from the field and almost 38% on threes. On the road, he's barely over 15 points per game on 36.6% shooting and below 26% on threes. It's a staggering difference. And I do think that a reason for that potentially is that when he's at home, you're getting the constant reinforcement. Obviously, you have your coaches and your teammates on the road, but when you see your friends and people that are supporting you in the crowd, it's much easier to sort of feed off their energy. The way Wednesday against the Grizzlies, Jalen had a bad start, but he kept going. He pushed through it. I think one of the things that happens on the road is that if things don't go well for Jalen, you see the body language really start to suffer. You see when he doesn't finish on one of those drives early in a game, you see him put his hands on his head. He gets very frustrated. And again, this goes back to the offseason. We've talked about this in recent pods, but one of the reasons the Rockets went with Fred VanVleet instead of James Harden, on top of the defensive benefits, offensively, they did not want the system to be James Harden and everybody else just be catch and shoot or cutting options. They wanted on-ball creation reps for guys like Jalen Green in particular. So it's on him to take advantage of those. That's the blueprint. And, there's a lot of reasons for that, and we can go into X's and O's. There are some things that I think they can do better, but I also think a lot of it just comes down to Jalen needing to be empowered, to feel confident. And I think at home, it's just a lot easier for him to sort of take the bull by the horns, to use an American expression, and just continue to fight through, as opposed to on the road. I just think sometimes you see him sort of take a "it's not my night" approach if the first quarter or two doesn't go his way. And the good news, he is just 21 years old. This is just year 3, so there's time for him to improve on that. And I will say that, as frustrating as it is, the fact that his highs are so high, that shows you that despite what the overall numbers may be, there's something there. There's a reason why, even if we look at Jalen compared to some other young guys, and he's fairly low on the list. If you asked, people around the league to rank, I guess, the top prospects under 25 and whatnot. At the same time, the fact that the highs are as high as they were on Wednesday night cannot be discarded. There's something special there, and it's just simply on Ime Udoka and the Rockets to consistently unlock that version. And so I think sort of the glass half empty, or the glass half full, excuse me, way to look at it is, look, the fact that he's doing it a lot more consistently at home tells you that some of this probably is mental. And so with time, with the right coaching, he is just basically 1 month into the Ime Udoka era after being 2 years into the tutelage of Stephen Silas. Then maybe over time, Ime Udoka can sort of burn off those bad mental habits. To me, that's the case for optimism, that, this home road split suggests that some of it may be mental. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and you mentioned that this season, right? And people can argue that it's a low sample size. I mean, if you go and look at his career, we're talking about 80 games at home and 75 games on the road. I'm not going to read you through the entire stats. I'll say it's 22 versus 18 points, which is a pretty big difference. It's 36% from 3 versus 31% from 3. And it's a 5% true shooting gap. True shooting is harder to sway either way than the normal efficiency stats. So this to say, I don't know what the difference is. I think the casual fan says, oh, when he's not at home, he's going out all the time, which I don't think is true.
No,
He's a
I don't
hard
think
worker
it's
for all accounts. But it really shows how there's just some weird things with Jalen, and I think you have to not reset the scale all the way back it's his first year, but it is his first year with good coaching and knowing what to work on, because I think his finishing at the
Yeah.
rim is something that he needs to work on. But you can make it simpler for him to finish at the rim if you have less people at the rim to contest them.
And we should note that if some of the issues are mental, like we've been discussing the last few minutes, then that's something that's going to take more time to fix. Because if it was just strictly tactical, that Steven Silas was just using him in terrible ways, and you put in a coach that knows what he's doing and runs better sets, you would expect to see a ton of progress immediately. But if it's a combination of not just the way he's used on the court, but overall his approach, and we're talking about 2 years of bad habits developed, then it's going to take longer than 1 month, no matter who the coach is, to fix those. And so I guess that's the case for optimism, but it's also the case for patience, because if that is a big part of the issue, then we have to concede that it's not reasonable for even Ime Udoka, as much as high of an approval rating as he has right now amongst Rockets fans, it's not reasonable for Ime to fix this that quickly.
Yeah, and I think above everything, I think something you have to really value is the fact that he was completely willing to completely change his role on this team.
Sure.
Right? His commitment defensively has actually gotten better as the season's gone along. It's not been a, hey, the season's going to go really well, and I'm really excited, I'm going to give it my all the first few games and it falls off. No, I think it's actually gotten better as the season's gone along, which is the opposite of what we've seen the past few seasons, which is guys come in really excited, they give it their all, then the reality settles in, and they get worse as time goes on. Jalen still makes mistakes defensively, right? He still sometimes sacks too far off, or sometimes he overplays a defender on a screen, and he's going to give up a 3. But the little things, like still trying to contest, not get he knows he's going to give up a 3, but he's still running and using his athleticism to try and make it as hard as he can within the realm of an open 3, to make it harder on the opponent. Like, he is fighting through basically everything. He's not taking possessions off at nearly the same rate, and I haven't seen him basically take possessions off for the most part. And then offensively, when it comes to playmaking, he does still like Ime says, he still predetermines the outcome of a possession a lot of the time. But when he's more confident, that doesn't happen as much. When he like, I think perhaps what's hard with him is he doesn't know how much help's going to come. Because what we saw last night was when he was sure that help was going to come, he knew where the ball had to go. I
Yeah.
think a lot of the time it's just when he's drawing a lot of attention, he knows what he has to do. But when he doesn't, it's when it becomes tougher, and when it becomes more when it's harder for him to make the correct reads. But he's been willing to do that and take a smaller role, which makes him worth the investment. Because if he's willing to do this now, as he gets better, like, it's worth investing in him for him to get better, because this is not going to go away, and we're seeing what it looks like when he's committed on the defensive end, and we know it's good enough that the upside of him being a scoring guard is worth pursuing. And I don't know if you have anything else on Jalen. I actually have a point about him that would help us segue
Yeah.
into a man if you want to do that.
Yeah. Well, a couple more things on Jalen I want to get to. So when you look at his home road splits, again, you can look just at the shooting and say, well, there's some small sample size theater to it. At this point, they've only had 5 road games. Personally, I don't think so, beyond the fact that they played 13 games at 82, which is not insignificant. Again, this mirrors trends from his first 2 NBA seasons. But even across the board, turnovers 3.0 to 1.8, fouls 2.2 to 1.3, steals 0.8 to 0.2. All of those better at home than on the road. So it's not just a matter of just flukishly some shots go in or rim in and out and basically shot luck. No, this is across the board. He's a more impactful player, and perhaps officiating has something to do with it. Besides getting positive reinforcement at home, I do think that games like the Clippers and Lakers, where the Rockets clearly are not getting a favorable whistle, that may contribute to his
You
sort of
can say
shrugging
it.
his
It was
shoulders.
rigged.
Yeah, okay, there you go. I like it.
I mean, the Clippers game was so odd. Like, look at
That
the
was
odds.
terrible.
Look at the Vegas odds on that game. There
Yeah,
is no way the Clippers are favored.
yeah,
Like,
that was ridiculous.
someone knew something.
Yeah, 7.5 points. That was an extreme number. I was like, you got to be kidding me. But yeah, just to underscore how important this is to the Rockets. Another split that's really meaningful and telling with Jalen Green. In the 7 Rockets wins, he's averaging nearly 22 points per game on 44% shooting and better than 39% from 3. In the 6 losses, he's averaging 16 points on 37% shooting and 25% from 3. So just a staggering difference there. And again, it sort of ties back into what we know about this team. When you look at the overall ratings, offense, defense, and total, they're 4th on defense, 18th on offense, 8th overall. The defense is consistent. It's there. Even if they've had a little bit of positive luck, when, if you squint hard enough, you can note some of the corner 3-point shooting numbers are due to tick up for Rockets opponents. Okay, even if they slide back from, say, top 5 to top 10, bare minimum, assuming health, they're going to be good on the defensive end. And so the variable is offense. And when Jalen Green is the tip of the spear, and when he can deliver at a close to number 1 option capability, then the Rockets are going to be really tough when you combine an above average offense with a defense that's consistently top 5, top 10 in the league. On the other hand, if Jalen is just a middling scorer, then where do those points come from? And so beyond just home road splits, I think win-loss splits, it shows you how important Jalen is to this team. And of course, the challenge for Ime Udoka is finding some way to keep those highs while not having the lows quite as low. One last point I want to get to on Jalen that I've wondered about of late. So there's been a lot over the first month of the season of just the Rockets feeling out and learning what works for this new group. And we've talked a lot on our recent pods about their most consistently efficient play being the 2-man action between Fred VanVleet and Alperen Şengün, both elite decision makers, and just take what the defense gives you based on that 2-man action. Here's what I think happens at times. Because they use Fred and All P in that way, it becomes very easy, especially because we've seen them start to stagger Fred and Jalen a little bit. I think it can become very tempting to sort of use Jalen in the same way. But the difference between Jalen and Fred is exactly what you said earlier. Jalen does not need a screen. Fred, at his size, usually does. So I do think that a bit of a conundrum is the fact that you have this great two-man action between Fred and LP, pick and roll, pick and pop, whatever it may be. And the Rockets have found so much success early on as they try and establish their identity. But Jalen needs to be used in a somewhat different way to optimize his skill set. So while I completely agree with you, and I saw so many people today on my Twitter timeline pointing out that Jalen does not need a screen, I think one of the reasons the Rockets might send a few more screens Jalen's way, and particularly with Alperen and Şengün, is because they're getting in the habit of doing that so much with Fred. Does that make sense to you? That's sort of the rationale I go back to, and it's just going to come down to the coaching staff getting a better feel for their players as the season progresses.
Yeah, I think even dating back to Stephen Salas, we've played pick and roll so much that the default is just to call for the screen. Like, it is when you don't call for a screen, it's usually an ISO, and an ISO is usually talked about as a bad thing. Like, you don't want to be a stagnant offense, and so the instant reaction is to don't even think about it, just call for the screen again, even if you have a mismatch. And this mostly with the Stephen Styles, not so much right now, but sometimes just like with the Grizzlies, sometimes the mismatch is there by default. Like, Santi Aldama cannot guard Jalen Green, and he was guarding Jalen Green all of last night. Like, that's easily something that you can attack, and
just don't overthink it.
Yeah, so sometimes we're overthinking, and to throw it back to what you said about the Alperen Şengün, Fred VanVleet two-man game. Alperen Şengün and Jalen Green two-man game is what a lot of people are clamoring for, but the difference is, like, if they stagger Fred and Jalen, right? So one of them is on the floor basically at all times, which means that usually, like, Jalen has limited time to play with Şengün because it's Fred, and when he does, like when Jalen plays with Şengün, Fred's also on the floor. That's basically the way the rotations are going. And when Fred VanVleet's not on the floor, neither is Şengün, but Jalen is. And so in those times, Jalen is just, well, usually not really even running pick and roll for the most part. And just
and another problem of this, by the way, and they seem to be getting away from this, but when Jock Landale is on the court, and thankfully they seem to be doing less of that and running more small ball with, be it Jeff Green, Jabari Smith Jr., whoever you want to say is technically your backup five. But Landale is struggling in so many areas. You can see that Jock knows, hey, setting a good screen is the only thing I can trust that I'm good at right now. So I think he tries extra hard to do it because he knows that. And I do think some of it's probably injury related. He had the ankle issue in the offseason, so I don't think he's in shape. But I do think that when Jalen's out there without LP, to your point, then those minutes that it's Jalen and Landale, I think Landale is trying way too hard to set a screen because that's the only damn thing he can do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think that makes all of the sense, and I think that eventually, especially since we have Jeff Green and Jason Tate's, I don't know if the shooting's held up. I haven't checked the percentage, but I think it's been respectable still. I think they're eventually just going to devolve to, listen, just run Jalen at the top of the key, have everybody space out because he's going to get by his guy if you give him enough space, basically every single time, and so. I know Jock Landale is like supposed to be the backup for Şengün, but I think we have to just cut our losses at this point. I don't think we should get rid of him. And I think a lot of people are mentioning, hey, we should trade him for another center or just cut him because he has no more money guaranteed. Like, his contract, even if he doesn't play for a team like the Rockets, who got to the salary cap but will struggle to get over, but couldn't basically get over it because usually you can't both get over the salary cap or too much over the salary cap in the year you use cap space unless you have a cap hole or a player to extend. The Rockets need Landale's salary, and it's really useful not just this year. Like they did with Landale basically the same thing they did with KPJ, but with none of the guaranteed salary. Like there's not even a million guaranteed, and so the salary is useful this year. It's going to be useful next year if they don't use cap space, and the year afterwards as well. Even if he doesn't play, he's more than worth just the roster spot. Like the Rockets traded 2 seconds to get rid of KPJ, but also to get Oladipo, who works as a human trade exception just for this year. So imagine the value. I mean, let's say that was worth a second for the Rockets. Imagine the value that they would place on a guy that's the traded player exception, the human TPE, but for 3 seasons instead, and you have the opportunity to cut it off at the end of each of these years, right? So Wendell's not going anywhere,
and the other thing to consider is that as good as Jeff Green has played, then he's someone that certainly is not untouchable, but he's signed to the same type of deal as Jock Landale, not as many years, but after year one, you do have that non-guarantee. And so if you want to keep Jeff Green around, which I do based on how well he's played in recent games, then that makes it all the more important to have Landale, since you're going to be trying, if at all possible, to not use Jeff's money to facilitate a trade. So that's the other part of it too, is that, hey, you really like Jeff Green, you want him to play more? Great. That's also why Jock Landale is really important financially, because with Jock, you can combine him and Victor Oladipo and get to guys in the, high teens, low 20s dollar-wise without including Jeff Green.
Yeah, and I also want to mention something. But now that you mentioned Jeff Green, listen, we got to remember Jeff Green's what, 36, 37. He can playing a small ball role. We saw how that affected the Rockets physically when they did it full time.
PJ Tucker,
back,
yeah,
with PJ Tucker, like they were absolutely gassed before the Gobert drama thing. That really wears on him, right? And it's fine in spurts. I'm not sure how his body will hold up doing
Fair
it
question.
if it's 16 minutes a game every single game. So I wonder how that's going to go and how that's going to impact them going after another big or not. And speaking about minutes, there's another thing that I wanted to mention, which I thought was really interesting. So people said that Nick Nurse was known for overplaying his players, namely Fred VanVleet. I think Spolin pointed this out last game, and so I went and checked most of the games. And Fred VanVleet's averaging like 37 minutes a game. Like he plays a lot. Thankfully the Rockets have him on a 2-year deal, so it's not like his body's going to, well, knock on wood, but his body's going to fall apart and they're going to be stuck with it. But he plays a lot. I think that shows how important he is for this team, that Udoka trusts him so much. But also he's playing 37 minutes a game, and you've got to consider the amount of games that we've blown out, in which we've blown out teams that we haven't played anybody in the fourth quarter. Yeah. So this is probably closer to 40 minutes a game if these games were close. Maybe you can make the argument that perhaps he'd play him less if he didn't have those games to kind of rest or play less to offset. So that about the minutes, and then the last one I want to make on Jalen is that, and this is kind of the transition to a man as well, is that yes, this season's all about winning, right? They're going to try to get the most wins they can because their job's on the line, because it's the next logical step in the rebuild, because Ime Udoka is a winning coach and that's the culture that they're trying to build. At the same time, it's not as clear cut as that, right? So because they are at the same time somewhat investing on young players, because you want to do a little bit of both. Like you want to win now because playing competitive basketball is good, and that's the 80%. Like 80% of the decisions are going to be swayed by that. But then at the same time, you wanna hold on to some upside, because being a scrappy defensive team that's winning because of vets plus one young guy that has star potential, that doesn't get you very far in the playoffs. The ceiling of that team is not very high. The Rockets need, like, Shingun's a hit, right? We've talked about it last podcast. Shingun's an absolute hit. I think he's a star. One star's not enough, and you can trade for one, but one star is usually not enough. And usually you want to trade for a star when you already have two, because that really pushes you over the top into championship favorite type team. But until we get to that point, the other 20% is giving guys, within reason, minutes that they perhaps don't deserve, or at the very least, not trade for guys to plug holes that are currently being somewhat plugged by a young player. And this applies to Jalen specific, right? The biggest hole the Rockets have right now is at shooting guard. Jalen is the worst performing player, I think, relative to his responsibility on the team in the starting lineup. Jabari is not a better player than Jalen right now, but Jabari is not asked to do as much. He's more of a role player.
Formula.
Yeah. And so if the Rockets wanted to win more games, the easiest step would be to trade for a Jordan Clarkson type to be a scorer. Obviously not Jordan Clarkson because he's having a terrible season, but you get the logic behind it.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, if Kevin Porter Jr. were still around, you might win more games by starting Kevin Porter Jr. instead of Jalen Green. But I don't think even before everything happened in September that they were going to do that, because they knew that Jalen was more important to the long-term formula. And so even if there were bumps, they were willing to take those because they, weren't willing to, they want to do everything they can to win games in the present without taking a clear step back to their long-term championship upside. I think that's the balance they're trying to strike.
Yeah, and so you're not going full Stephen Silas. You're not gonna. If you were to do that, you'd start a man Thompson. You'd bring Cam Whitmore back from the G League and play him 20 minutes a game. You do all of those things, but it's I think it's basically an 80-20 split. 80% winning, 20% holding onto some upside, and then for some of the key pieces, they have to develop because we're still building towards something. This is not the current Rockets are not the ultimate goal. This is a lot better than we have, but this is not good enough to warrant 3 years of rebuilding. I have a lot of doubts that as good as we look right now, that this was the vision that Rafael Stone sold Tillman Fertitta on as the ultimate goal. It wasn't this. It was a contender, a perennial contender. They've talked about it plenty. And this applies to Jalen Green, which is why I don't think that they'll make a move to get a starting shooting guard. At the same time, it also applies to Amen Thompson in a way. I had a tweet earlier, if not this week, the week before, with Amen Thompson nearing coming back to play for the Rockets as he's injured. There is a little bit of a debate whether, how much he'll eat into or Aaron Holiday will eat into Amen Thompson's minutes, because it's that 80-20 split. Like, Ime Thompson is a priority, and the Rockets drafted him number 4. They didn't trade the pick, so they're clearly very high on him. At the same time, I don't think it's hard to argue that Aaron Holiday is probably the better player right now. He's not the better defender, but the Rockets lack shooting so much that his shooting. I'm not even sure what the number is right now, but he'll be respected shooting wise. He'll get guarded on the perimeter.
His Aaron Holiday's on-off numbers are one of the best on the team, by the way.
Yeah, so I'm sure that's somewhat influenced by the fact that we lost before he kind of came into the rotation. I think I'm not sure if Amanda's actually won a game.
Yeah, because he didn't have any negatives or warts from those first 3 games. Yeah.
So I've just this to say, it's a balance that they'll have to strike between. Well, Aaron Holiday will probably contribute to winning more, but we still gotta play a man, which is why I said, hey, maybe there's a chance that the man starts off a week in a G League or something like that. But then at the same time, it depends really on how you're going to structure the rotations. And there's other things that a man can bring that actually that translate to winning. Like the defense is going to translate to winning. He's very active there. He's a good rebounder. And the transition play, which is one of the biggest weaknesses for this team, which is surprising because for a team that gets a lot of stops, usually that leads to good transition buckets. But they're a tough team, right, defensively. And those same players offensively are more of the brute force type. So they're going to, when they're in transition, they know they have an advantage. They're going to take it to the rim basically every single time. And so they don't look around to see what the other options are to generate better shots, which leads to a lot of people complaining that Jalen Green doesn't get transition looks. Well, Amen Thompson has built his career, or not the entirety, but a lot of his draft stock on his transition play and his ability to make decisions then. So hopefully him being there leads to the Rockets making better decisions in transition, which I think is also tied to what I said before about the type of defense that we play. Usually we're running off of misses, we're not running off of steals, even though we get a fair amount of them. When you're running off of steals, you catch the defense even more off guard than when someone shoots and they miss the shot. That gives the defense more time to react and recover in transition. So I think that plays a factor as well. But the overarching point, Amen's about to come back. I think there are going to be discussions between him and Aaron Holiday. I think probably they'll play both. I don't know how they're going to pull that off. But even
that might help you decrease Fred's minutes, by the way.
It might.
I think that's one option. I also think that within a young player, there's going to be, low lows, but there's also going to be very high highs. We've seen they're not the same archetype, but they do have a very similar body. I mean, twin brother in Detroit, Asar Thompson's had a very good start to his rookie season, albeit on a bad team. And so if a men has a really strong game, I think he's the type of player that the Rockets might actually ride with based on the upside a little bit longer, as opposed to Aaron Holiday. Even if he makes a couple of shots, look, the upside is so limited that they're going to go back to Fred at the first available opportunity in the game. Whereas with the men, do I consider it likely on a night in, night out basis? Absolutely not. But there may be, a game or two that he has it going on in which the Rockets say, hey, you know what? I don't need to bring Fred back at the 8-minute mark. We can wait until the 5 or the 6, something like that. And so it's just little things like that that might help you just a tiny bit when it comes to managing Fred's minutes. Because I agree with you. Like, it's funny, everybody criticized Nick Nurse for that last season, and now you're sort of seeing the same thing play out here. And it's, it's easy from a distance to say, wow, coaches should know better. But then when you look at how important Fred is to managing a game on both ends, and you get back to an environment where you actually feel pressure to win every game, then yeah, it's really tough to justify sitting Fred for any longer than you need to, because he's just so tough, he's so hard-nosed, and he's so important to your formula. That might be one way that a men can help you a bit when he returns. But I think we're on the same wavelength when it comes to the overall point, which is that you can be excited for a men when he comes back because he's one of your core 6. He was drafted 4th overall for a reason, but you shouldn't look at it as though he's instantly going to upgrade this team. There's a very real possibility that on a lot of nights, Aaron Holiday's minutes are currently better and would be better if he played in the future.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people on Twitter specifically are like, oh, like they're heralding like the return of Amen Thompson as like some sort of savior for the second unit, or whatever it is. And it would really be best if we temper the expectations, because a men's game is something that's hard to translate, right? The difficulty with the shot is something that players struggle with throughout their careers when they don't come in as shooters, and that requires you to build teams a certain way. It's not, I think, something that Aaron Holiday does on this team that a lot of that kind of goes unnoticed, or that isn't valued quite enough, is that we have a lot of guys whose games are like very, at any point, it's hard to explain. What I mean is their games are like, I don't want to say as developed, but I guess I'll just give an example, right? Aaron Holiday is really versatile in the way that he scores, right? He has the floater game. He can shoot threes. He can hit the mid range. He can hit layups. He has that in between game. There's a lot of, when scrambling, you can trust Aaron Holiday to get a bucket in a way that a lot of our players can't, right? Like Jalen kind of telegraphs his game. If he's at the perimeter and there's no spacing, he's going to shoot a step back 3 every single time. When he gets to the rim, he finishes the same 1 or 2 ways basically every single time. When he has space in between, it's always basically a step back. When people sag off of him within the 3-point line, he's basically always going to step back into a mid-range shot. Jabari Smith has the post fadeaway. He has attacking a closeout, and he has shooting threes. Fred VanVleet doesn't really have a floater game, or at least doesn't showcase it, doesn't really get to the rim, but he shoots a lot of threes and he shoots a lot of long mid-range shots. Dylan Brooks is a little bit more versatile. At least he tries the more different stuff, but you get what I mean. If you were building a player on 2K, we have a lot of guys that have like tendencies at 100 or at 10, is what I would say. There's a lot of shots that we just don't attempt. And Aaron Holiday is a little bit different in the sense that, kind of like a Lou Williams, obviously not as good as Lou Williams, but he's a little bit more versatile in the ways that he can scramble and still get a shot up and still be good, right? I think it's not it's a little bit typical of smaller players. Usually they have that skill set, and so I think that
They're
ability.
craftier.
Yeah, they're craftier. I think that ability to, when scrambling, which is a lot of what the Rockets do in second unit, still getting a bucket, right? Kishan Tate's also good at scrambling, but he's a little bit less versatile. But getting those buckets that keep you within reach until the starters come back is something that's really valuable. And I think a man doesn't have that ability yet to scramble and make stuff happen out of rhythm. I think out of rhythm is a good way to put it, right? If the defense falls apart and he finds himself in the middle of the paint or at the free throw line, I'm not sure I trust him to make something happen and just get a bucket, right?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And Aaron Hoy brings that dimension to our second unit, where a lot of our players are not really that well rounded. I mean, Tari Eason is an example of this, right? He'll struggle to, when scrambling, he'll struggle to score. Like, he'll grab a lot of rebounds, but then a lot of the times he won't do much with them, exactly because of this. Jabari Smith is a lot of the same thing, and he brings that dimension to the Rockets that I think we don't quite have. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, since we're talking about a man, talk about his draft classmate with the Rockets. Cam Whitmore's absolutely killing it in the G League. He's looking like a completely different player. And he's making, I'm considering how good he is already defensively compared to most prospects that go into the G League and dominate offensively. I wonder how long they can justify or they can hold him in the G League while he's playing this well, because he's doing stuff that translates. And the Rockets need exactly what he's doing. They need that scoring. And it's not like they're bringing up a 6-foot guard or whatever, the 21-year-old G League version of Isaiah Thomas, right? He is someone that's very scalable to smaller roles and high and bigger roles. I could definitely see a role for him with the main team. It's also kind of hard to say who you'd take out because, well, the prime candidate would probably be Keishan Tate, but he does so much stuff, so many of those connector type little things. I don't know how it's one of those typical analyst comments like, this guy should play, but I can't give you the solution of how he could play.
My guess is that he ultimately plays due to an injury that at some point over 82 games is going to get picked up. Somebody else is going to sprain an ankle and be out for a few weeks. You already had it with Amin Thompson, but you're only counting on him for a 15 minutes per game backup role at this point. My suspicion is that at some point you'll have a more significant rotation piece that unfortunately has something happen to them, and that's where Cam can fit in. But to bring this full circle, I also think that's another reason why you don't make a Jordan Clarkson type move to just patch the shooting guard position. Besides the fact that you want to give Jalen every opportunity, because it's not just about now. Yeah, it's nice you're 7-6, but you want to build a sustainable contender over time. And Jalen developing into a star level player is a crucial part of that potential blueprint. You also want to leave minutes potentially open for Cam Whitmore, who can do many of the same things. So beyond just simply giving Jalen his opportunities, I also think sort of keeping the door open for Cam Whitmore, that's another reason why that you don't go out of your way to just get a Jordan Clarkson type for the sake of maximizing every win in 2023 to 24. You want to do it while keeping the door open for either big internal leaps for the future or trades that are just simply more impactful, like an actual disgruntled star down the line. You don't want to use your assets on just a patchwork type player that's going to potentially block some of the core six while also not giving you the upside themselves to actually elevate the team to that level.
Yeah, and just to add on to my little point about Aman and Jalen and the 80-20 split, it's also like they can toe the line in this way because they're not getting blown out every game, right? And Jalen is perhaps losing if you replace Jalen with Jordan Clarkson, if he was good on this team, you probably don't lose to the Clippers and to the Lakers. Game's probably not as close. Probably don't lose in the end. But at the same time, the expectations are not so high that you're forced to make a move. Like, they are good enough to justify you continuing. Like, if they were terrible, there would be more pressure to make a move like that. But since they're currently at 7-6, And well, they'll probably drop below 500 in the next couple of games, but then it becomes easier again. Since the games are still competitive, right? Since they're not getting blown out, like within the losses, they're good losses, and within the record, it's close enough to, or it's better than expectations, but it's close. It's acceptable enough that they can do both at the same time, the development and the winning, which is why it makes it even tougher for you to like. There's these factors. There's the fact that they don't really have disposable assets that they can just throw away besides second round picks. Most of the assets that they have are really valuable. Making a trade, right? Making a trade would probably be a move around the margins, not something as critical as just replacing a starter.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we will wrap it there. We'll be back in the near future with more. Rockets have a break between, I'm trying to think. Yeah, Friday's game against the Nuggets, and then they don't play again until Tuesday night in Dallas. And we should note that the Nuggets game is an in-season tournament, as is that one in Dallas. The Rockets probably need to win both of those to have a chance of making it to the 18 quarterfinals, because their loss against the Clippers was an in-season tournament game. So keep that in mind as well. Beyond the bigger picture and their record over 82 games, these results, the next two, are going to be dual purpose. So if you want to play meaningful ball in the in-season tournament, and especially have an opportunity to get to Las Vegas for the Final Four in early December, then from that standpoint, the Denver and Dallas games coming up are must win. However, I agree with you. They're going to be difficult to get simply because, well, the Nuggets, how likely is it that you can beat Nikola Jokic and defending champions twice in under 2 weeks? And then the Dallas game is on the road, and the Mavericks, especially at home, have had a pretty good start this season. So not going to be easy, but who knows? It is fairly favorable scheduling wise. The Denver game to start off Friday night is at home, where the Rockets are 7-1 this year. They're fairly rested, and then 4 days between the Nuggets game on Friday and the Dallas game on Tuesday night. So they should be rested, get in some good practice time. And who knows? Maybe we'll be back for another episode in between these. Perhaps we'll have a guest as well to do a little bit more digging into how the Rockets have gotten off to the 7-6 start that all in all is still quite promising, even though they have lost 3 of their last 4 as of our recording time on Friday, the 24th. All right, for one episode, I think we've covered enough ground, so we will break it here. For Paolo Alves, you can follow on Twitter/X at Paolo Alves NBA. I'm Ben Dubose. Follow me on there at Ben Dubose. Also, this show, The Logger Line, if you go to simply The Logger Line at Twitter/X and hit up the link tree in the bio, that's how you can access not just our individual episodes, which you can find all the distributors, Apple, Google, Spotify. Subscribe, leave a positive review if you've not already, but also check out the content from our friends, partners, and sponsors, Carbach Brewing, Sports Talk 790, USA Today's Rockets Wire. All the information you need, both distributors and friends and sponsors of the program, it's all at the link tree, which you can find at the Logger Line on Twitter/X. All right, with the plugs complete, we'll wrap it. Again, thanks as always for listening. Happy Thanksgiving. We're certainly thankful for you, our listeners, and please stick with us because we will be back with more episodes in the near future. Go Rockets.